So let's go ahead and get started. Our next unit is Thanatology, which means the study of death and dying. So in forensics, most of this is the job of the medical examiner. That's the person who's going to determine meaning of death, manner of death, mechanism of death, cause of death, and time of death. So that's a pretty big job. And we need to know what all of these different terms mean in order to move forward. So let's just go through a couple of things today that should help you with your material and assignments for the rest of the week. So I'm going to go ahead and read this for you. This is just a scenario about some people who die at a fair a while back. So here we go. The Washington County Fairgrounds in upstate New York was the site of the 1999 annual county fair. Well water, the source of drinking water for the event, became contaminated with E. coli. E. coli is a natural and necessary inhabitant of our digestive systems, but one strain, carried by cattle, produces a powerful toxin. While cattle remain unharmed by the toxin, it is potentially fatal to humans. Of the 127 cases of E. coli reported from the fair, 2 became fatal from E. coli poisoning and the resulting infection. As is often the case with E. coli poisoning, the deaths were from the youngest and the oldest of the attendants from the fair. So a 79-year-old man passed away and a 3-year-old girl passed away. So we know that this is normal because those are vulnerable populations. So older people and younger people have immune systems that either aren't fully developed or have been deteriorating. So this is kind of to be expected here. E. coli is a leading cause of foodborne illness. Scientists estimate there are 73,000 cases of infection and 61 deaths in the U.S. each year. Most common forms of contraction are eating undercooked meats, eating contaminated bean sprouts or fresh leafy vegetables, or via person-to-person contact in families and child care centers. Other causes include drinking raw milk or swimming in water contaminated with sewage. So let's look at these 2 cases of people who died. So officially on the death certificate, the manner of death is accidental. So nobody on purpose poisoned this well water at the fair. It was an accident that naturally occurring E. coli got into that water. Nobody knew about it, and these people drank it and died as a result. The cause of death was food poisoning or water contamination. So the cause leads to the mechanism of death. So the cause of death is what kind of initially starts the process of that person beginning to die. So because of the food poisoning, the mechanism of death sent those people into kidney failure, which actually caused them to physically pass away. Okay, so that's just kind of a scenario example to help you understand these terms that you're unfamiliar with. So there are actually 5 manners of death. I know on your notes it says 4, but the 5 manners of death are natural, accidental, suicide, homicide, and the 5th one is undetermined. So if the medical examiner for some reason can't figure out what actually caused the person to die, we can't figure it out, we'll list it officially as undetermined. Cause of death is the immediate reason for a person's death. So this is what starts the process of dying. So I have some examples here. A heart attack, stabbing would lead to somebody bleeding out. So they wouldn't actually die from being stabbed. They would die from exsanguination or blood loss, right? Strangulation would be the cause of death. The mechanism of death for strangulation would be loss of oxygen or asphyxiation. Okay, do you guys see how that works, hopefully? So the mechanism of death is the specific body failure that leads to death. So I have more examples here. So hopefully this is pretty clear. Keep in mind that we will have virtual office hours. If you're a little bit foggy on this is something that we can talk about in our office hours too. So, official manners of death, we're going to go through one by one. Some of these are pretty self-explanatory. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory. So, natural is when you die of natural causes. So your body fails, usually because of age. You can die of old age, you can die of disease or chronic illness, things like that. Okay, accidental death is when you die because of something that is unplanned. Maybe you're in a car accident. That's an unplanned event, and that causes multiple traumatic injuries, and you die as a result from that. That would be something accidental. If you were to go skydiving and your parachute doesn't open, that would be an accidental death, most likely. Suicide is one we're not really going to talk about. We're just going to kind of pass over it. You guys all know what that entails. Homicide is the death of one person caused by another. So I want you guys to notice something about this definition, is that it says nothing about intent. Okay, it does not matter if you intended to kill a person. If you kill one person because of your actions, that is going to be a homicide every single time. I know there are kind of some blurred lines here when we get into like intoxicated manslaughter and things like that. That's kind of a different ballgame. But if you cause the death of another person, that is a homicide. Or multiple people, we can have multiple homicides. And then the last one is undetermined. When the medical examiner or a coroner cannot determine the cause of death for certain. So before we get into this, remember the difference between a medical examiner and a coroner is that a medical examiner has a license to practice medicine. He has a degree in medicine. A coroner just needs a high school diploma. So 95% of the time, the medical examiner is more qualified than the coroner. Okay, so some examples of undetermined deaths. We see here the first one, a man with a heart condition is attacked and dies from a heart attack during the assault. So this is undetermined for a couple reasons, because we have some questions about it. It could be either or. So did the assault cause this man to have a heart attack? In which case, is it a homicide? Or is his chronic heart condition the cause of his death? And that would be a natural cause. So you kind of have to decide whether you think the assault escalated that heart condition to the point where, had he not been attacked, would he still have had a heart attack? These are questions that we'll never be able to answer, which is why it's undetermined. Example 2, an elderly woman dies after being kept from receiving proper health care by her son. Okay, so this is kind of a questionable example. So the woman obviously has health issues. So does she die from those health issues and we call it natural causes? Or is it a homicide? Because maybe her son has the responsibility to make sure she gets medical care because maybe she can't drive anymore. Maybe she has dementia and she can't think clearly and he's her power of attorney. Maybe it's his responsibility to keep her on her medication and to get her to her doctor's appointments. And if he intentionally does not do that, does it make it a homicide? This could also be an accident, just depending on the information that we don't know about this scenario. So, okay. So the last thing I'm going to show you today are 3 examples of death certificates. So this is all going to tie into kind of your first 3 days of lessons for my class, and also kind of the 4th day. Okay. So death certificate number 1, a death certificate can tell us a lot of things about the person who has died. You're going to find their full name. You're going to find like their occupation. So this guy, John Osborne, is a white male, age 51 years old at the time of his death, and he was a carpenter building houses for his profession. You'll also see some information about his family. If we look at the other side here, this is what the medical examiner, or in this case, coroner, if you look right here, it's going to say coroner, listed about what he discovered. So the cause of death is as follows: internal injuries, accidental, causing instant death. So in this case, the cause of death is internal injuries. The mechanism of death is a big old question mark, because we would just write instant death. And the manner of death is accidental. So this was probably, because of his occupation, some kind of construction accident. So that's how this person died. And then at the bottom of death certificates, you're usually going to find like information about funeral, burial, stuff like that. The next thing you're going to see in your notes is a couple of more death certificates. I will let you look at those just kind of on your own, see if you can figure out what happened to those people, and then a case study over Terry Schiavo, which is part of your assignment for day 4 of this week. So other than that, I hope to see you guys in virtual office hours next week. All that information is at the end of this video. So happy studying, and I hope to see you next week.